He told her plainly the morning she arrived, standing in the wind with mud on his boots and his hat pulled low so she couldn't read his eyes. "I don't need a wife. I need someone who can handle the books and not spook the horses." She had traveled 900 miles on 2 trains and a rattling stagecoach with 1 trunk and a letter she'd memorized by the 3rd day. She looked at him straight and said, "Then show me the horses." The letter had come in February, when the ground in Louisville was frozen solid and Callum's prospects were about the same. She was 29 years old. The schoolhouse where she had taught for 6 years had been shuttered when the county withdrew its funding, and she had spent the winter stretching what little she'd saved while watching the other teachers find husbands or parents to go home to. Ivy had neither. Her mother had died of fever when Ivy was 12. Her father had remarried a woman who made it clear, without ever saying so directly, that the house in Louisville had a finite amount of space for people who didn't belong to her. The advertisement in the Matrimonial Gazette had been brief to the point of bluntness. Rancher, Wyoming Territory, 42 years. Horse breeding operation, Garnet Creek. Need capable woman for ranch management, cooking, records, correspondence. Hard work, hard winters, false promises made here. Reply only if you mean it. No name at first, just a postal box number in a town called Dalton. She had written back. Of course she had written back. She had listed what she could do. Teach arithmetic and letters, keep ledgers, manage a classroom of 22 children who didn't want to be there, which she had always figured was excellent preparation for managing anything difficult. She had not pretended she was more than she was. She had not told him she was looking for love. She had told herself she was looking for a door. His reply came 10 days later. The handwriting was like him. She would think later. Short strokes, nothing wasted, no curve that didn't serve a purpose. Miss Callum. Name is Reid Acker. Ranch is called the Double Pitch. I need someone who doesn't startle easy and doesn't need entertaining. If that suits you, come in April. I'll have someone meet the stage in Dalton. She had packed her trunk in March. The someone who met the stage was a ranch hand named Amos Wicker, a man of perhaps 60, with a sunburned neck and the kind of eyes that sized you up in under 3 seconds and made their peace with whatever they found. He shook her hand. He took her trunk without being asked. He did not offer much in the way of conversation for the 2-hour wagon ride to Garnet Creek, which Ivy used to prepare herself, running through the list of what she knew how to do, checking it the way you check provisions before a long trip, making sure everything was still there. The Wyoming landscape opened up around her as they rode, wide and spare, and so enormous that the sky looked like something from Scripture. She had expected to be afraid of it. She wasn't. Reid Acker was standing in the yard when the wagon pulled up. He didn't move toward them. He just stood there with his arms crossed, watching her climb down with an expression that revealed absolutely nothing. He was tall and lean with the kind of jaw that looked like it had been deciding things for a long time, and eyes the color of a winter afternoon, pale gray and very still. She walked toward him with her hand out. He looked at it for a moment before he took it. His grip was brief and firm. That was when he told her plainly that he didn't need a wife, that he needed someone who could handle the books and not spook the horses. She told him to show her the horses. Something shifted behind his eyes, brief and involuntary, and then it was gone. Amos took her trunk to the house. Reid walked back toward the barn. Ivy stood in the yard and watched him go. Behind her, she heard Amos make a small sound that he covered with a cough. "Don't take it personal," he said quietly. "He's like that with everybody." "How long has he been like that with everybody?" she asked. Amos was quiet for a moment. "Going on 4 years now," he said. She didn't ask what had happened 4 years ago. She was beginning to understand the shape of it already. The double pitch house was large in the way that houses are large, when they've been built for more people than currently live in them. There was furniture, and there was space, and there was the quiet of a place where no one had laughed in a long time. In the front room, above the fireplace, there was a small leather hairbrush set on the mantel that no one had moved in what looked like years. Beside it, a baby's bootie, pale yellow, the kind knitted by someone who had done it carefully, with love, for a child they intended to dress in it. Ivy set her bag down in the kitchen and stood very still for one full moment, looking at neither of these things and seeing both of them. Then she rolled up her sleeves and started a fire in the cook stove. The first week was a lesson in silence. Reid moved through the double pitch like a man who had signed a private agreement with himself never to need anything from anyone. He was up before light and in the barn before she had coffee on. He came in for meals, ate steadily and without comment, and went back out. He left a handwritten list of her duties on the kitchen table the second morning: accounts, correspondence, feed schedules, cooking, and did not explain any of them. She read the list once, folded it, put it in her pocket. She did everything on it. Then she did more, because the house needed more. She found the accounts in the worst shape she'd seen since her father's store manager had spent 2 years skimming off the top. Not from dishonesty here, but from neglect. The kind of neglect that settles in when a man has stopped caring whether next year arrives. She spent 3 evenings going through the ledgers with a lamp and a cup of tea, and what she found on the third night made her set down her pen and press both hands flat on the desk to keep them steady. The feed bills were overstated, the breeding fees were underrecorded. And the biggest problem wasn't either of those things. It was a contract tucked into the back of the second ledger, dated 4 years ago. A document signed in Reid's hand, but a signature so unlike his current writing, which was controlled and exact, that it was plainly the work of a man who had been somewhere else entirely when he made it. The name at the top of the contract was Reid Acker, Reid's older brother. A 30% stake in the double pitch, transferable at Sutter's discretion. She read it twice. She folded it and put it back exactly where she found it. She closed the ledger. She needed to understand more before she said a word. The crack in the wall came on the 11th day, and it came from the barn. She heard the sound while she was replanting the kitchen garden. Not panic, but something lower, a horse in distress. She set down her trowel and went. Reid was in the far stall with a mare who had caught her foreleg on a wire, working quickly, but his own left hand was bleeding freely from where the horse had caught him in the first moment. He was ignoring it entirely, the way men ignored things they'd decided didn't count. "Let me see your hand," Ivy said. "It's fine. It's going to contaminate the wound if you keep working with it open." He looked at her. In 11 days, this was the most direct she had spoken to him. He could see she meant it. He held out his hand. She cleaned it with the carbolic she'd found in the tack room and wrapped it with a strip of clean cloth. She worked quickly and without fuss, aware that he was watching, not her face but her hands, the steadiness of them. "You've done this before," he said. "Country school," she said. 22 children who could not stop hurting themselves. He almost made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. It didn't make it all the way out, but it was close. She sat with the mare that night, in the barn with a lamp and her mending. Around midnight, Reid came to check and found her there and said nothing. He sat down on the other side of the stall, his back against the boards. For an hour they kept watch together, in the particular quiet of two people who have run out of reasons to keep their distance. She was the one who finally spoke. "What happened 4 years ago?" she said. She felt him go still. "The contract in the back ledger," she said. "The one with your brother's name. That signature isn't yours. Not your current hand, anyway. I've been looking at enough of your writing to know the difference." The barn was very quiet. Outside, the Wyoming night was enormous and completely still. "Hannah," he said at last, flat in the way things are flat when they've been pressed down for a long time. "My wife. She died in October, 4 years ago. The baby came too early," and he stopped. Hannah had 3 names picked out. She couldn't decide. She was planning to meet her first and see which one fit. A pause. "She never got the chance, and afterward I couldn't. It felt like something Hannah should do, so she's still without one." The booty on the mantel, the hairbrush, the quiet of a house that had stopped at a particular moment in time and never been restarted. The baby had no name. Ivy let that land in full without trying to make it smaller. "Sutter came up from Cheyenne when it happened," Reid continued. "He was here 2 weeks. Said he wanted to help. Brought documents. Said the ranch needed restructuring, medical costs, a temporary arrangement. He put a pen in my hand." A long pause. "I don't remember signing." "He told you it was about the feed contracts," Ivy said. He turned to look at her. "It gives him 30% of the double pitch, transferable at his discretion," she said. "It's not about the feed contracts." The silence after that was different from all the silences before it. She heard him breathe in slowly. She heard him go all the way through it the way she'd learned, He went through hard things, completely, without performance, before he surfaced again. "Show me," he said. They went through the ledger together at the kitchen table, the lamp burning low between them. Reid sat across from her and asked precise, hard questions, and she answered everyone. He was sharper than he appeared. She had suspected it, and now she was certain. The sharpness of him in those 2 hours, working through the numbers and the contract language with the focus of a man waking up after a very long sleep, was something she hadn't been prepared for. When they finished, he sat back and looked at the document. "He needed money," Reid said. "Sutter always needs money. Cards, mostly. He's been in trouble with cards since he was 17. "That doesn't make what he did legal," Ivy said. "No, it doesn't." He folded the contract and put it in his shirt pocket. "Why didn't you tell me as soon as you found it?" "I didn't know enough yet," she said. "I needed to understand the whole shape of it before I added to what you were already carrying." He looked at her for a moment. "Why do you care about this? You've been here 2 weeks. This isn't your ranch." She held his gaze. "Because I know what it looks like when someone has been doing everything alone for too long," she said. "And I know what it means when someone decides to show up instead of turning back." She paused. "I didn't come 900 miles to turn back," she said. Something moved in his face, slow, the way ice moves in the first real warmth of March, reluctant and inevitable at once. He said he knew a lawyer in Cheyenne, land contracts, federal cases. He hadn't spoken to him in years. "Write to him tonight," Ivy said. The corner of his mouth moved very slightly. He sat back down and wrote the letter. Sutter Acker arrived on a Thursday, 12 days later, without warning, which told Ivy everything she needed to know about how he operated. He was 4 years older than Reid and broader through the shoulders, with an easy smile that took up too much room and the habit of filling every silence with words that didn't mean anything. He called Ivy Little Lady when Reid introduced her. She noted it and said nothing. He ate at their table and told 3 stories about Cheyenne, positioning himself at the center of each one, while his eyes moved over the house with the particular attention of a man cataloging what he considered his. Reid said almost nothing through the meal, but Ivy had spent 6 years reading the faces of children who couldn't hide what they felt, and she could see that Reid's left hand was very still on the table, the way a hand is still when it is working hard not to move. That evening, while Reid was in the barn, Sutter found Ivy in the kitchen. He leaned against the doorframe, pleasant, arms crossed. "I hope you understand the arrangement I have with Reid," he said. "He signed it willing. I have the original." "I've read the original," Ivy said, without looking up from the stove. A pause. "Beg pardon." "The contract. It was in the second ledger." She set down her spoon and turned. "You told him it was about feed contracts. That's not what it says." Something moved behind Sutter's easy smile. "Not much, but enough." "You're smarter than I expected," he said. "Most people are," she said. He left before breakfast the next morning. He did not say goodbye to either of them. Ivy watched from the kitchen window and waited until Reid came in. "He'll move soon," she said. "He came to see what you had and whether you knew what he held. Now he knows I know." Reid poured his coffee and stood by the stove. "Marcus Webb in Cheyenne wrote back yesterday. He thinks there's a case. The signature, the timing, the misrepresentation of terms." "How long do we have?" "Sutter can call in the stake whenever he decides to. Claim a management dispute, force a buyout or a sale. He set down the cup. If he files before we do, he sets the terms." "Then we file first," Ivy said. He looked at her. "You understand what that means. His name against mine, his word against mine. This becomes public." "He already made it that," she said quietly. "He did that 4 years ago when he put a pen in your hand while you were in the worst of it." The kitchen held the words between them. "All right," Reid said. The night before he rode to Cheyenne, he came in late and found her at the kitchen table with the lamp still burning, every document organized, the contract flagged in the margins, the timeline laid out in her careful hand. He stood in the doorway and looked at the table. Then he looked at her. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I wanted it ready in case Marcus Webb needed to move quickly." He sat down across from her. He looked at the papers for a long time, and then he said without looking up, "Hannah used to tell me I carried too much alone. Said it like it was a character flaw." A pause. "She wasn't wrong." Ivy was very still. She was 26 when she died, he said. She'd been talking to the baby for months before it happened, making plans. She had those 3 names and couldn't settle on one, so she was going to meet her first and see which fit. He stopped. His voice held, but only just. She never got the chance. And afterward, I couldn't give her a name myself. It felt like something Hannah should do. So I put a marker that says Acker. And I haven't gone back to open Hannah's journal. The booty on the mantel, the unnamed child beneath the cottonwood at the north fence. She knows what she is to you, Ivy said. I don't think a name changes what she knows. He looked up. He looked at her the way he had in the barn that first night, past the wall directly. You're going towards something, he said. It came out like a question. She had said it to him once early on when he'd asked why she'd gotten on the train. She hadn't realized he'd kept it. You are, she said. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his briefly, and then let go. He gathered the documents and said quietly, "Get some sleep." She sat alone at the table after he left. Her hand, where he'd covered it, was still warm. Marcus Webb's telegram came 2 days after Reid returned from Cheyenne. Amos brought it at a pace that told her something had happened. Ivy read it twice, then set it on the table and waited. Reid was in from the south pasture in 15 minutes. He read the telegram standing up. His face went through several things quickly. Comprehension, something cold, and then something harder and cleaner underneath both. Sutter filed in county court this morning, Ivy said. But Marcus's federal complaint takes precedence in land disputes. He can petition for an emergency stay on any county court action. She slid the document she'd prepared the night before across the table. You should send the telegram to Marcus before noon. He read what she'd written. He looked up. You prepared this last night, he said. I knew he'd move the moment he found out you'd been to Cheyenne, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, and in the look were things she was learning to read. The wall was thinner now, translucent almost, and what was behind it was something that made her careful and very still, the way you are still around something you don't want to frighten away. Ivy, he said. Send the telegram first, she said. Say whatever you're going to say after. The federal stay was granted on a Friday. Amos came to tell her at a dead run, his hat in his hand and his face open with relief. The county court action was suspended pending federal review of the contract's validity. Sutter's claim was in limbo. The double pitch was not going anywhere. When Reid came through the kitchen door that evening, Ivy was at the stove, and she turned, and she let him see it on her face before she said a word. He read her face the way she'd been learning to read his. It held, he said, not a question. The stay is granted, she said. Sutter can't touch the property. He crossed the kitchen and he did something he had never done before. He put both hands on her face. The way you hold something you have nearly lost the chance to hold. And he looked at her for a long moment with all the distance between them in it, and what was behind his eyes was no longer behind anything. Thank you, he said. His voice was low and rough. It wasn't just me, she started. I'm not thanking you for the legal work, he said. She knew what he meant. The garden, and the accounts, and the nights by the lamp, and the mare in the barn, and the name she hadn't pressed him to say, and the question she hadn't made him answer before he was ready. He kissed her. It was not the kind of kiss that happens in triumph with music rising. It was quieter than that, the kind that said, I mean this and I know what it costs, and I am choosing it anyway. She put her hands over his, and the kitchen held them both in the stillness of something being decided. When he pulled back, he kept his hands where they were. I don't know how to do this right, he said. I don't think anyone does, she said. You just decide to, and then you figure it out. I've been deciding for a while, he said. I know, she said. I was waiting for you to catch up. Something happened to his face, a loosening, old and deep like frost going out of ground that has been frozen for a very long time. He made a sound that was close to a laugh, rough-edged, unpracticed, the laugh of a man relearning the shape of something he'd stored away. You could have said something, he said. You needed to get there yourself, she said. Otherwise it doesn't hold. He looked at her. He lowered his hands but took one of hers and held it. It holds, he said. The federal case moved through the autumn and into winter. What Marcus Webb found when he examined the original contract against the sworn account of Reid's state in those weeks after Hannah and the baby corroborated by Amos, who had been on the double pitch through all of it, was not ambiguous. Sutter did not go to trial. He negotiated a settlement in December. The contract was void. The 30% stake had standing. The double pitch was whole. Reid came home and told Ivy the outcome over supper in the same level voice he used for most things. But she saw, when he looked down at his plate, the faint movement in his jaw that meant he was feeling something he hadn't yet decided how to carry. "He needed money," Reid said finally. "And I was right there, and I wasn't myself. I was in the worst of it, and he came in and said he'd help, and I believed him because I needed to believe something." He was quiet. He's been afraid his whole life, and he doesn't know any other way to handle it except to take things. And I don't know how to help him with that. He looked up. "But I'm going to try, not now, but at some point." She looked at him, at the width of what he'd just said, the difficulty of it, the grace underneath the difficulty. "That's a generous thing," she said. "It's the right thing," he said. "Those aren't the same." In the spring, she found him at the mantel. He had the booty in his hand, not looking at it, his thumb moving slowly over the pale yellow knitting. She came to stand beside him and said nothing. After a long moment, he said, "I've been thinking about her name." She waited. "Hannah had 3 names in her journal," he said. "I found it a year after, and I put it away and couldn't open it again." He looked at the booty. "I opened it last week." She did not ask what the names were. She let him come to it. "Rosalind," he said quietly. It was the first one on Hannah's list. She wrote a note beside it. She said it sounded like someone who would grow up to be strong. His voice caught, very briefly, and held. "I think that was always her name. I think Hannah just hadn't gotten there yet." The cottonwood at the north fence was visible through the front window. Ivy looked at it and then looked at Reid, and she thought about what it costs to put a name to something you've been holding nameless for 4 years. The weight of finally saying it. The relief underneath. "Rosalind Acker," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. He set the booty back on the mantel. He straightened the hairbrush beside it, so both sat even. He stood and looked at them for a moment, at the small evidence of everything that had happened in this house before Ivy arrived and everything that had happened after. Then he turned and took her hand. "I'd like to do this right," he said. "What this is between us. I'd like to say it in front of people who matter and mean it the way it's supposed to be meant." She looked at him. "We're already married," she said, "on paper." "That's what I mean," he said. "I don't want the paper version to be the only version." The kitchen was very still. "Yes," she said. They were married in May, when the Wyoming ground was thawed and the cottonwoods along Garnet Creek had gone fully green. It was small by intention. Amos in a clean shirt, his hat pressed to his chest, his eyes suspiciously bright. A handful of families from the valley who had, over the winter, begun stopping by in the way people do when they've decided someone is worth knowing. A woman named Bess Fraser from the neighboring property who had shown up with preserved plums the week after the federal stay and had come back every few weeks since with opinions about the kitchen garden that were more accurate than comfortable. Reid stood across from Ivy and made his promises in the voice she had come to know, low, unhurried, each word placed like something he intended to keep. She made hers back. A year after Ivy Callum stepped off a stagecoach in Dalton, Wyoming, the double pitch was everything it had always had the bones to be. The breeding operation turned a profit for the first time in 4 years. The accounts were balanced quarterly. The kitchen garden came back every spring, larger than the year before. Amos had taken on 2 new hands and managed them with the quiet authority of a man who had been waiting for the operation to be worth managing. Bess Fraser had a standing spot at the kitchen table and a coffee cup that was understood to be hers. And on an ordinary morning in October, with the Wyoming sky enormous and pale above the ranch, Ivy sat at the desk in the office, her desk undisputedly now, writing a letter to her old colleague from Louisville, the only one who had written back after Ivy left, who was curious and persistent, and who deserved the truth. The truth was this: she had come to Wyoming expecting a job and found a life. She had come to keep books and found a man who was learning, slowly and deliberately and at considerable personal cost, to be open again. She had come with 1 trunk and a letter she'd read until the paper went soft. And she had ended up with Rosalind's booty on the mantel of her own fireplace, and Reid's handwriting on the other side of the accounts ledger and the knowledge, certain and unhurried, that she was exactly where she had chosen to be. She did not use the word love in the letter. She used words like real and solid and chosen. She thought her old colleague would understand. She sealed the letter and set it with the outgoing post and went to find Reid, who was in the barn, where he always was in the morning, and who would, when she got there, look up from whatever he was doing and look at her with the expression she had been learning all year. The one with no performance in it, no distance, just the plain unhidden fact of a man who was glad of what he saw. She walked toward it. She had been walking toward it since Louisville, since the letter with its blunt handwriting and its honest terms, since the long train ride west and the stagecoach dust and the man standing in the yard who had told her he didn't need a wife. She had known even then that he was wrong about that. She had just given him time to find out for himself.